the lap of the vampire king. Rain pressed against the city like 1,000 tapping fingers. Streetlights blurred into golden smears on the wet road, and every car that passed sounded like it was dragging the night behind it. Lina ran with one heel half broken, clutching a small cloth bag to her chest as if it could keep her heart from falling out. She didn't look brave. She looked like someone who had been brave for too long. Behind her, a voice cut through the rain, smooth and familiar in the worst way. "Lina, don't be dramatic, come back." That voice belonged to Rafe, the kind of ex who could smile while he slowly drained the joy out of every room. He wasn't chasing her to apologize. He was chasing her because he couldn't stand the idea that she might escape his control. Lina's lungs burned. Her fingers were numb. She turned a corner and almost slipped, and that's when she saw it. A black carriage, old-fashioned, impossible in the middle of a modern city, parked beneath an archway covered in ivy. The horses were real, their coats glossy as night, and they didn't flinch at thunder. A single lantern glowed inside the carriage like a warm secret. Lina didn't think. She just pulled the door open and climbed in. The moment she entered, everything went quiet. Not silent, quiet. Like the world outside had been turned down, and something inside this carriage had been turned up. It smelled like cedar wood and clean linen and something colder, like winter air. And there, sitting with perfect stillness, was a man. He wore a dark coat with silver buttons, and his hair fell neatly back as if the storm had no permission to touch him. His face was pale, but not sickly, more like moonlight. When he looked at her, his eyes weren't red like the stories. They were a deep, ancient shade of brown, the kind that made you feel like you were standing in front of a locked door. Lina froze. She had heard the rumors, everyone in the old neighborhoods had. A vampire king who lived beneath the city, who collected debts the way other people collected coins. A ruler who never raised his voice because he never needed to. Her body shook so hard the bag in her arms rustled. She tried to speak, but her throat was tight with panic. The man's gaze dropped to her broken heel, then to her trembling hands. Not with hunger, with something closer to quiet concern. Outside, footsteps splashed through puddles. Rafe was close. Lina's mind raced. If she went back outside, she'd be trapped again. If she stayed here, she might be making a different kind of mistake. The vampire king didn't move, didn't lunge, didn't smile. He simply shifted slightly, making room beside him as if he were offering a seat on a park bench, not inside a carriage that felt like a myth. Lina's voice came out small. "Please, I just need a place to hide. Just 1 minute." The king watched her like he was listening to more than her words, like he could hear the history behind them. Then, with a calmness that felt unreal, he spoke. "You can hide," he said, gentle as falling snow, "but not on the floor." Lina blinked. "What?" He glanced toward the carriage door as Rafe's shadow crossed the lantern light. The king's hand lifted, slow and controlled, and tapped the seat beside him. "Here," he said. "Sit." Lina hesitated, because sitting beside him felt too intimate, too dangerous. The stories said vampires didn't offer kindness unless they wanted something. But the footsteps were right there. Rafe's hand reached for the door handle. Lina made a desperate choice. She slid forward, and with nowhere else to go, she lowered herself onto the vampire king's lap. The king's body was cold through his coat, but his arms didn't grab her. They simply steadied her, like he understood that she wasn't trying to be bold. She was trying to survive. And then something strange happened. The king leaned closer, not to bite, not to threaten, but to whisper against the shell of her ear, so softly it felt like a secret meant only for her. "Breathe," he murmured, "and do not look at him. He only wins when you look afraid." Lina's eyes stung. No one had ever said that to her, not like that. Outside, the door handle rattled once. Then, without warning, The vampire king spoke louder, his voice still calm, but carrying a quiet authority that made the storm sound smaller. "Remove your hand," he said to the person outside, "before you lose it." The handle froze. There was a pause, so thick Lina felt it in her ribs. Rafe laughed, nervous fake. "Who is this? Lina, come on, you're embarrassing yourself." Lina wanted to shrink into nothing. Her entire life with Rafe had been practice for this feeling, being made to seem foolish for protecting herself. The king's jaw tightened, not in anger, more like restraint. Like he was holding something back because he had promised himself he would be better than the monster people expected. "Say her name with respect," the king said quietly, "or don't say it again." The rain outside grew louder, as if the night itself was listening. Rafe's voice turned sharp. "You think you're some kind of hero. She's mine." Lina flinched at the word mine. It hit her like a chain around the throat. The king's arms tightened just slightly, not possessive but protective, steadying, like a shield that didn't ask permission to exist. Then the king lowered his face toward Lina again, and this time his whisper didn't sound like advice. It sounded like a vow. "I can end this," he breathed, "but I need you to tell me something first." Lina's heart pounded so loudly, she thought Rafe might hear it through the door. "What?" she whispered back, barely able to speak. The king's eyes flicked to the cloth bag in her arms, the bag she'd been holding like a lifeline. "What did you steal from him?" the vampire king asked. "That made you run into my carriage, on the one night I promised myself I would never help anyone again." Lina's fingers tightened around the bag. Because she hadn't stolen money. She had stolen something far more dangerous. And just as she opened her mouth to answer, the carriage lantern flickered, once like a warning. And the vampire king's expression changed, as if he had just recognized her. "Lina," he said, voice suddenly softer than the rain. "No, it can't be you." The door handle turned again. This time, it turned easily. And the carriage door began to open. The carriage door opened just enough for rain and streetlight to spill inside, turning the velvet shadows into something sharp. Lina's whole body went tight on the vampire king's lap, like she was trying to disappear without moving. The king didn't flinch, but the air around him changed, still calm, yet suddenly heavier, like a storm deciding where to strike. Rafe leaned in with that practiced smile, the one that always pretended to be harmless. Water dripped from his hair onto his jacket, and his eyes scanned the carriage like he was shopping for something he could take. "There you are," he said, voice sweet on top and bitter underneath. "You scared me, Lina." Lina's throat closed. She had heard that exact line after every argument he started and every apology he forced. Scared me, like her fear was an inconvenience he owned. The vampire king tilted his head, studying Rafe with the patience of someone who had lived long enough to recognize the same kind of cruelty in different costumes. His voice stayed gentle, almost polite. "She is not coming with you." Rafe chuckled and stepped closer, as if the idea was ridiculous. "And you are, what, her new ride? Look, man, this is between me and my girlfriend." Lina's stomach turned. Girlfriend. He said it like a stamp, like a label he could slap back onto her whenever he wanted. She fought the urge to speak, because speaking around Rafe always ended with her being blamed for the sound of her own voice. But the king's hand rose, slow and controlled, and rested lightly on Lina's forearm. Not restraining, grounding. A silent message. You're not alone in this moment. "Not your girlfriend," the king corrected, and there was a quiet finality to it. "Not your property." Rafe's smile slipped. His eyes flicked to Lina, then to the king, calculating. "Lina, come on. You're sitting on a stranger's lap in a weird cosplay carriage. You want to talk about embarrassing." The insult landed exactly where Rafe meant it to, on her shame. Lina felt heat crawl up her neck. She hated that her mind still reacted to him, that her confidence still had bruises shaped like his words. Then unexpectedly, the Vampire King sighed. A real sigh, tired, almost human. "She is sitting there because you chased her," he said, "not because she wants attention." Rafe snorted. "Oh, you're a mind reader now." The king's lips barely moved, but something like sadness passed through his eyes. "You don't need to read minds," he replied. "You only need to notice trembling hands." Lina blinked fast. That simple sentence, trembling hands, made her feel seen in a way that was almost painful. Not as a problem, not as an overreaction, as a person. Rafe's face tightened. He reached forward, quick and careless, aiming for Lina's wrist like he had done 100 times before. "Get over here." The Vampire King moved first. Not fast in a flashy way, not violent, just certain. His hand closed around Rafe's wrist and stopped it midair like the world had hit a wall. The grip looked effortless, but Rafe's expression changed instantly, surprise flashing into fear. The king's voice dropped, calm as deep water. "You will not touch her." Rafe tried to pull back, laughing again, louder this time. Okay, wow, strong grip. Let go, Dracula." Lina expected the king to threaten him. She expected the monster the rumors promised. Instead, the king released Rafe's wrist and leaned back, unbothered, as if he didn't need force to win. He simply pointed toward the street. "Leave," he said. Rafe rubbed his wrist, eyes narrowed. "Or what?" The king looked at him for a long moment. When he answered, his words were almost too soft to hear. "Or she will finally understand that fear is not love," he said, "and you will have nothing left." That hit Rafe like a slap, not because it was loud, but because it was true. Rafe glanced at Lina, trying to pull her back with a look, the way he always did. "You know me. You belong with me. Don't make me the bad guy." The old Lina would have lowered her eyes. The old Lina would have apologized just to stop the tension. But on the Vampire King's lap, with his quiet steadiness under her shaking, something inside her shifted. She didn't look away from Rafe. And for the first time, she didn't try to fix his feelings. "I'm not going," Lina whispered. Her voice trembled, but it was real. "I'm not your anything." Rafe's smile cracked. The nice mask slipped, showing the impatience beneath. "You're being manipulated," he snapped. "You always do this. You run to strangers and then you come crawling back." The king's gaze went distant for a split second, as if Lina's words tugged at a memory he kept chained. When he spoke again, his voice carried a warning, but not the kind Rafe expected. "She won't crawl," the king said. "Not if she learns to stand." Rafe scoffed, but his eyes weren't confident anymore. The carriage felt too old, too still, too controlled. Like stepping into someone else's world where his usual tricks didn't work. Then Rafe's attention dropped to the cloth bag in Lina's arms. "What's that?" he asked, and his tone sharpened with sudden interest. "Lina, what did you take?" Lina's hands tightened around the bag so hard her knuckles ached. The bag had seemed small when she grabbed it, small enough to hide under her coat. But now it felt heavy with consequence. The Vampire King noticed. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Answer him if you want," the king murmured to Lina, not to Rafe. "But choose your words like keys. Some doors don't close again." Lina swallowed. She could hear the rain, the horses shifting outside, the tiny creak of leather straps. She could also hear her own heartbeat, loud and insistent, like it had been waiting years for her to speak as herself. "It's not money," she said, looking at Rafe. "I didn't take your cash. I took the thing you used to scare me." Rafe's face went still, too still. "Give it back," he said quietly. Lina's stomach dropped. That reaction confirmed it. Whatever was inside the bag mattered more than his pride. The Vampire King's voice lowered, careful. "Lina," he asked, "what is it?" Her fingers trembled as she reached into the bag. She pulled out a small, worn leather notebook, creased at the spine, swollen with tucked papers. It didn't look magical. It looked ordinary. But Rafe took a half step forward like it was a weapon. "That's private," he said, and the word private sounded like dangerous. Lina's eyes burned. "You wrote things down," she whispered, the realization turning into horror as she remembered finding it. Pages of names, pages of little confessions, screenshots printed and folded, notes about how to handle people, how to break them softly so they didn't notice. Not blood, not gore, just cruelty with a pen. "It's a list," Lina said, her voice shaking, "of what you did to me, to other girls, what you told us to feel, how you planned it." The carriage felt colder, not because of the king's body, because of the truth. Rafe's eyes flashed. "You don't even understand what you're looking at," he snapped. "You're twisting it. Give it here, Lina, now." The Vampire King's gaze stayed on the notebook, as if he were reading Lina's pain through the paper. "Why did you take it?" he asked her gently. Lina's lips parted, and something raw came out. "Because I needed proof," she whispered. "Not for the police, for me. I needed to stop wondering if I was crazy." The Vampire King's expression softened in a way that didn't match the legend at all, like he understood that kind of doubt too well. Rafe's voice rose, sharp with panic. "This is insane. You're going to ruin my life over a notebook." Lina looked at him and her voice steadied just a little. "You ruined my life slowly," she said. "I'm just taking it back." The Vampire King let out a quiet breath, as if a decision had been made inside him. "I know this book," he said suddenly. Lina turned toward him, startled. "What?" Rafe froze, eyes darting. "You don't know anything." But the king wasn't looking at Rafe anymore. He was looking at Lina like she was a memory that had walked into his carriage wearing rain and fear. "That handwriting," the king said softly, "belongs to someone who once came to my court asking for power. Someone I refused." Rafe's face drained of color. Lina's voice came out thin. "What does that mean?" It was the first time the Vampire King's calm wavered. Not into rage, into regret. "It means," he said, "he didn't become powerful on his own. Someone taught him how to feed without fangs." Rafe lunged forward, desperate now, reaching for the notebook again, faster, careless, panicking. And the Vampire King finally showed a different side of himself. He didn't strike, he didn't hurt. He simply spoke one word, low, ancient, and impossibly commanding. "Enough." The air in the carriage seemed to press down. The lantern flame steadied. Even the horses outside went still. Rafe stopped mid-motion like his body had forgotten how to disobey. His eyes widened, humiliated and afraid. Lina stared, breath caught. The king hadn't touched him, yet Rafe couldn't move. The king leaned closer to Lina, voice barely above a whisper. "I can keep you safe tonight," he said, "but safety is not the same as freedom." Lina's eyes filled. "Then what do I do?" The king's gaze dropped to the notebook in her hands. "You choose," he said. "Do you want to hide from him or end the hold he has on you?" Outside, the rain softened, as if the city was holding its breath. And then Lina heard it, Rafe's phone buzzing in his pocket, vibrating like a warning. He couldn't move his hands, but the sound kept going, insistent. The screen lit up through the fabric, and Lina caught a glimpse of the name flashing across it. "Mother." Rafe swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to Lina with sudden terror, and for the first time she saw it clearly. Rafe wasn't the top of the chain. He was just the messenger. The Vampire King's voice turned grave. "Lina," he murmured, "if that call is what I think it is, then running into my carriage may have saved you." Lina's blood went cold. "Saved me from what?" The king's eyes lifted to the half-open door, to the rain, to the street beyond. like he could already hear someone approaching. "From the person," he said quietly, "who taught him how to make you doubt your own mind." The buzzing stopped. The street went unnaturally silent. And a new pair of footsteps, slow, confident, began walking toward the carriage. The footsteps outside didn't rush like Rafe's had. They measured the puddles, unafraid of the cold rain, unhurried as if the street belonged to them. Lina felt the Vampire King's posture change beneath her, still gentle, but alert in a way that made her realize he had been holding his power back like someone holding back tears. Rafe's face looked smaller now, stripped of his smug control. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The king's one word, enough, still held him in place, not as punishment, but as a boundary he couldn't cross. The carriage door eased wider, and a woman stepped into the edge of lantern light. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like the kind of person you might ask for directions, the kind who would smile politely while moving you exactly where she wanted. Her coat was neat, her hair pinned back, her umbrella perfectly angled so not a drop touched her shoulders. Her eyes were sharp, trained, and coldly observant. "Rafe," she said calmly, as if calling a child in from the rain. "You're making a scene." Lina's throat tightened. The name on the phone hadn't lied. This was his mother. Rafe's lips trembled with anger and fear. I can't." He tried to move and couldn't. The humiliation turned his face red. The woman's gaze slid past him and landed on Lina, like Lina was an item on a shelf that had been misplaced. "And you," she said softly, "are being difficult again." Lina's stomach flipped. That sentence carried years in it. It carried the old instinct to apologize just to keep the peace. It carried the familiar trap: if you push back, you're the problem. The Vampire King spoke before Lina could fall into that hole. "She is not difficult," he said. "She is awake." The woman finally looked at him fully, taking in his calm face, his stillness, his authority. Instead of fear, a faint smile touched her mouth, interest, not warmth. "So the stories were true," she murmured. "The King of Night rides in a carriage like an antique gentleman, pretending he's civilized." The king's voice remained measured. "And you must be the one who taught him," he said, nodding toward Rafe, "how to hunt without teeth." The mother's expression didn't change. "I taught my son to win," she replied. "The world does not reward soft people." Her words were polite, but the meaning was cruel in a way that didn't need shouting. Lina felt something in her chest break, not from new pain, but from clarity. Rafe hadn't invented the way he twisted things. He had inherited it, practiced it at a dinner table, sharpened it in a home where kindness was treated like weakness. The mother's gaze dropped to the leather notebook in Lina's hands. "Give that to me," she said, as if asking for a napkin. Lina hugged it closer. Her fingers shook, but she didn't hand it over. The mother sighed, disappointed. "Lina, you don't want enemies, you want a quiet life. You want relief. Give it back and this ends." The offer sounded sweet, and Lina realized that was the most dangerous part. It wasn't a threat. It was a lullaby meant to put her back to sleep. The Vampire King leaned closer, his voice so low only Lina could hear. "She is offering you comfort," he whispered, "but only if you return to the cage." Lina's eyes stung. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered back. His hand, cool, steady, rested gently over hers on the notebook. "You don't have to do it loudly," he said. "You only have to do it honestly." Lina took a shaky breath and looked directly at the mother. The lantern made Lina's wet eyelashes glimmer, and for once she didn't care if she looked messy or emotional. She cared about being real. "No," Lina said. The word was quiet, but it didn't bend. "You don't get it back." Rafe made a strangled sound, furious. "Mom, make her." The mother lifted a hand to silence him without even looking, a tiny gesture that told Lina exactly who controlled who. Then she stepped closer to the carriage door, eyes narrowing at the king. "You're interfering," she said. "This girl is confused. She's always been dramatic. She needs guidance." Lina's stomach clenched. Dramatic, the old label, the old weapon. The king's gaze didn't harden into violence. It softened into something more frightening to manipulators: certainty. "She doesn't need guidance from people who benefit from her pain," he said. The mother's smile thinned. "And she needs it from you, a vampire king." Her eyes flicked to Lina, then back. "What do you want from her?" The question hung in the air, heavy and suspicious. Lina felt it too. What did he want? People didn't help her for free, not in her life. The king paused, as if he were choosing truth over pride. "I want nothing from her," he said at last, voice steady. "I want her to leave this night with her mind intact." For a second, the mother looked almost bored, like compassion was an outdated belief. Then she spoke with quiet precision. "You think you're saving her," she said, "but you're just giving her a new fantasy, a new powerful man to hide behind." Lina flinched because the accusation landed close to her fear. She didn't want another savior. She didn't want another shadow to live under. The vampire king didn't argue. Instead, he did something Lina didn't expect from a king of anything. He loosened his hold. The air pressure in the carriage lifted like a released breath, and Rafe suddenly stumbled forward, able to move again. He caught himself on the doorframe, shocked. Lina's heart jumped. "Why did you?" The king looked at Lina, and in his eyes was a painful humility. "Because she's right about one thing," he said softly. "If you hide behind me, you will always fear what happens when I'm gone." Then he shifted, and with careful respect, he guided Lina off his lap and onto the seat beside him. He kept his hands visible, open, non-threatening, an unspoken promise that protection would not turn into possession. The mother's eyes flickered just slightly. She hadn't expected that. Rafe, newly free, took an eager step toward Lina again, anger reigniting. "Now, give it to me." Lina's chest tightened. Her instinct screamed to back away, to fold, to surrender just to end the pressure. And then, right on time, something inside her remembered the vampire king's first whisper. "He only wins when you look afraid." Lina sat up straighter, even though her legs were still trembling. She reached into her cloth bag again and pulled out her phone with wet fingers. Rafe blinked. "What are you doing?" Lina's voice shook, but it didn't crack. "I'm calling my sister," she said, "and I'm sending her photos of every page." The mother's calm finally slipped just a hair. "Lina," she warned, "be careful." Lina looked at her and understood the lesson in a single, clean line. People like this relied on silence the way others relied on air. "I am being careful," Lina said. "That's why I'm not doing this alone anymore." Rafe lunged for the phone. Before he could touch her, the vampire king simply lifted his cane, an elegant black thing Lina hadn't noticed, and set it between them like a closing gate. No strike, no harm. Just a line Rafe couldn't cross without choosing to become exactly what he pretended he was. Rafe stopped short, breathing hard. The mother's eyes flashed toward the cane, then to the king. "Still pretending to be civilized," she said. The king's tone stayed quiet. "No," he replied. "I am practicing it." Lina's call connected. Her sister's voice burst through the speaker, alarmed. "Lina, are you okay? Where are you?" Hearing that familiar concern, real concern, no strings, nearly made Lina collapse. She swallowed hard. "I'm okay," Lina said, and it was the first time she'd said it without lying. "I need you to listen. I'm sending you pictures. I need you to keep them safe, and I need you to come get me. Please." Her sister didn't hesitate. "I'm coming. Send your location right now." Lina sent it with shaking hands. Then she started taking photos of the notebook pages, one after another, the camera flash briefly lighting the carriage like tiny bolts of truth. Rafe's face twisted. Stop, that's mine. Lina glanced up, tears gathering, but her voice held. That's my life, she said. Those are my memories. You don't get to rewrite them anymore. The mother's eyes turned calculating again, searching for a new angle. You'll regret this, she said quietly, the threat dressed as wisdom. People don't like women who cause problems. Lina's lips trembled into something that was almost a laugh, small, incredulous, but real. It surprised even her. Then they can dislike me, Lina said. I'd rather be disliked than disappeared. For a moment, the vampire king's gaze softened, proud in a way that didn't take credit, like he was watching someone rescue themselves. The mother stepped back, rain tapping her umbrella. Rafe, she said, sharp now, we're leaving. Rafe's eyes darted between Lina and the king, fury and fear mixing into a bitter helplessness. This isn't over, he spat at Lina. Lina's hands stopped shaking for one clear second. She looked at him and spoke with a calm she had never owned before. It is, she said, for me. The mother's face went blank again, and she turned away, guiding her son back into the rain with the same quiet control she'd used to guide him through life. Their footsteps retreated, swallowed by the storm and the city lights. When they were gone, the carriage felt warmer, not in temperature but in spirit. The lantern steadied. The horses shifted and exhaled softly, like they'd been holding tension in their ribs. Lina let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside her for years. She clutched the notebook, then suddenly didn't know what to do with her hands without fear to hold. The vampire king spoke gently. You did the hardest part, he said. You spoke while your voice was shaking. Lina turned toward him, eyes wet. Why did you help me? She asked. You said you promised you'd never help anyone again. His gaze drifted to the rain-streaked window, and for the first time his immortal calm looked like a man carrying an old regret. Because I once watched someone I loved shrink into silence, he said, and I told myself it was not my business. I told myself I was too dangerous to intervene. He swallowed, as if he didn't need to breathe but still needed to steady himself. I was wrong, he admitted. That mistake made me a king, and it made me lonely. Lina's chest ached at the honesty. And when you saw me? I saw the same trembling hands, he said, and I realized kindness is not a weakness. It is a choice that costs something. A small, unexpected sound escaped Lina, half laugh, half sob. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her wrist. You're not what people say you are. The vampire king's mouth curved into the faintest smile, tired but real. Neither are you, he replied. Outside, a car slowed. A familiar voice called her name. Her sister, rushing through the rain with a jacket held over her head, eyes wide with worry. Lina's throat tightened again, but this time the tears felt clean. Before Lina opened the door, she turned back to the king, holding the notebook close. I don't even know your name. He hesitated, then answered like the truth mattered. Lucian, he said. Lucian Vale. Lina nodded, imprinting it into memory. Thank you, Lucian. He inclined his head, not as a ruler accepting praise, but as a person receiving a simple human word he wasn't used to hearing. Go, he said softly. Build a life where your fear doesn't get a vote. Lina stepped down into the rain. Her sister grabbed her, hugging her tight, and Lina hugged back like someone learning a new language. She didn't look back right away. But when she finally did, the carriage was still there. Lucian sat inside, watching with a quiet, almost reverent stillness, like witnessing a rescue he didn't perform, only protected. Her sister pulled away slightly, peering toward the carriage. Who is that? Lina stared at the lantern glow, at the calm silhouette, at the man who could have been a monster and chose to be a boundary instead. A friend, Lina said, surprised by how true it felt. Someone who reminded me I'm allowed to leave. Her sister didn't understand, not fully, but she squeezed Lina's hand like she didn't need to. "Come on," she said. "Let's go home." As Lina walked away, the rain began to soften. Not stop, just soften like the night was easing its grip. Behind her, Lucian touched his chest where her trembling hands had rested earlier. And for the first time in a long time, the Vampire King didn't feel like a legend. He felt like a man who had finally chosen courage over reputation. And in the dim carriage light, he whispered to the empty seat where Lina had been, a promise meant for himself as much as the world. "Never again," he said, "not while I still have a heart that remembers." The carriage wheels turned, quiet as a secret, disappearing into the rain, leaving Lina with something rarer than protection. A future she had claimed with her own voice.